Hey there, everyone. Mychal Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology with yet another question and answer segment where practicing astrologers bring me their questions and I provide them answers based on my astrological practice. If you're enjoying these Q&A segments and you'd like to work with either myself or an OSA certified astrologer, then by all means check out our website where you can book yourself a high-quality astrological consultation today. Also, I answer many of these questions and more in my book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, A Depth of Beginning in the Celestial Art, which you can buy a copy of on Amazon.com. And if you'd like to become a professional astrologer, then check out our Professional Astrologers Diploma Program, as well as our Medical Astrologers Diploma Program by visiting the education page of our website.
Okay, so my first question is, why would someone go see an astrologer for a natal reading? What is the astrologer's kind of ideal client?
So the question is, why would a person see an astrologer for a natal reading? This is a wonderful question because it's a question I ask myself often as well. And the question I ask is, why do people come to me for a reading? What is the purpose of someone getting a natal astrology reading? It's a very existential question that I think every practicing astrologer should ask themselves, because at the end of the day, the core of this question is, what is the benefit of receiving a natal astrology consultation? This is a point that I sometimes struggle with, especially in terms of just reading the basic natal chart to discover the person's natal promise within this lifetime. More often than not, when you give somebody that basic chart reading, they say, yeah, this sounds just like me. Yeah, this is exactly who I am. This is exactly with my relationship to money and siblings and family and children and sickness and spouse and fear and religion and career and friends and my bad habits has been. This is exactly who I know myself to be. And so for me, on the receiving end of that, a part of that is wonderful, magical, mystical, because there is no reason why I should have known that person's story independent of that person actually verbally telling me their story. However, their natal chart has given me access into understanding parts of their lives that I would never be privy to. So, from that perspective, I think it's such a rich and a rewarding practice because we do have that additional level of information that just would not have been accessible to us before. But on the other hand, because I think everything has two sides, I ask myself, and in the past, I have asked myself, if you are telling someone nothing that is new, everything that you said to this person, they said, I know that about myself already, I know that about my life experiences, then what is the purpose of getting a natal reading in the first place? For me, I think the purpose of getting a natal reading is experiencing the magic of having somebody else curate your story without you telling that person what your story is. Now, what's important about that is that when we can do that, and when we as astrologers are skillful enough to do that, we give someone a touchstone of stability and certainty in their lives. And that touchstone lets them know that they're not just some random burst of gas floating through the cosmos, but it allows them to know that they were an intentional thought and an intentional decision that was made within the mind of God. And from my own spirituality and religiosity, I think that there's nothing more affirming than being able to give somebody that certainty or to give somebody that clarity that their lives and the experiences of their lives aren't just the events that proceed out of the workings of random chaos, but that everything that they experienced in their lives was meant to build them and mold them and shape them into the exact person who they've become with their exact complexes, their exact strengths, their exact weaknesses to further support the continuity of creation. So, on the one hand, I think that that is my metaphysical understanding of why it's important to receive a natal chart reading. I also think that in the West, especially in North America and Europe and places that are very highly technologically advanced, I think those places, more than anywhere else, need tools such as astrology. Because there is something that's always been true about the human experience. The more technologically advanced we become, especially in this modern era, the more disconnected we become from understanding who we truly are and who we're truly meant to be. And so we don't have this rich understanding of our story or of our destiny or of our roots in the same way as we find people coming from more indigenous cultures do have that. I think it was Joseph Campbell who said that any culture without a functioning spiritual mythology is a culture that is quickly dying. And in the West, we don't really have a functioning spiritual mythology. We have very structured forms of orthodox religion. We have institutionalized spirituality, which institutionalized spirituality sounds like an oxymoron because there is something about spiritual experience that's meant to be wild, that's meant to be freeing, that's meant to be expressive, that's meant to operate beyond the parameters of anybody's institutions. So, this notion of our institutionalized spiritual forms of religion within the West don't actually correspond with the actual purpose of spiritual practice. So instead of having living spiritual traditions, we end up with these very structured but very cold and oftentimes very empty expressions of religiosity that don't actually have the ability to make us know what we're meant to be on this earth to do. It might give us a textbook, and it might say, read this textbook every day and make sure that you're living your life in harmony with this textbook. But having an external Bible that we live our lives in harmony with doesn't necessarily allow us to live in harmony with that which is specific about us and that which is individualized and in radiant expression within ourselves. So the only things, as far as I'm concerned, that actually do that are things such as astrology and things that have this specific connection to destiny and to fate. And there might be other systems within the world that aren't astrology that also can reveal to someone their destiny or their fate. Chiromancy, for example, which is astrological hand analysis, does that because you have your two hands, hopefully, for your entire life. And so there are various forms of body reading that were developed in the East that are meant to tell a person their destiny or their fate by reading their eyes or reading their face or reading their hands or reading their feet or reading the overall shape and form of their body as a means of giving to a person their roadmap for this lifetime. And there's also astrology. And between those two things, I don't really know of any other systems. Sure, there's numerology, which is meant to tell a person their destiny or their fate through interpreting the numerical combinations that exist within a person's name and date of birth. I can't actually think of anything else because I don't actually practice anything else. I think the Enneagram which comes to us through the works and the writings of Gurdjieff. The Enneagram is meant to also give us this understanding of who we are. And we've found so many things arising within the West as a means of filling this hole and this vacancy that people feel within themselves. And that hole and that vacancy is a hole of destiny, which is really curious because in the West, we have imbibed this concoction of free will. But it's interesting that for people who are so gung-ho about their free will, we are the people of all of the world's cultures, of all of the world's civilizations. We in the West are the ones who feel this yearning or this hole or this emptiness that we have to fill because we don't really know. For all of our advancement, we haven't really come closer to ourselves. And so we have all sorts of systems and tools, the Enneagram, like I mentioned. There's also temperament testing. There's also all of these things that allow us to divide ourselves into various neat categories. There's human design, for example. There's also the gene keys. There are all of these systems that allow us to divide ourselves into these neat categories. But when we step back, even the Myers-Briggs test, when we step back and when we look at the purpose of those things are meant to give us a manual of who we are. And by extrapolation, those things are meant to give us a manual of what our destiny is in this lifetime by virtue of us being a supersonic battery projector. Or whatever people are. I don't even follow human design because I think it's kind of ridiculous as far as I'm concerned, because I just hear people walking around talking about how they're a flaming, fiery manifester and the supersonic battery projector and then the lightning pack generator and all of these things. So I get very overwhelmed when I hear people talking about human design. However, the point is when we categorize ourselves in these ways, we're doing so with the intention of discovering what our specific path or trajectory in life is meant to be. And that is the only thing that astrology has ever promised us. Astrology has always promised us the ability for us to understand who we are within this lifetime, and by virtue of understanding who we are, to also give us the ability to understand where we're meant to go, what path we're meant to follow, and what our destiny is. And so all of the various tools that we've now come up with as a means of answering that question for people, all of those things can be reconciled within astrology. So if you're a person who has ever felt drawn to any of these systems of self-analysis, the Myers-Briggs test, the Enneagram, the numerology, the human design, and all of these things, you probably will find a greater sense of stability and security and self-knowing and self-understanding and just an overview of the actual realities of your life by going to a trained and seasoned astrologer as opposed to bumping around amongst these various systems that don't really have the ability to really speak from the absolute depths of who you are. And I'm not saying that all of those other systems don't have the ability to describe you in a very penetrating way, but very often the information that you get from all of those systems individually is the information that you find within your individual natal chart. So, in answering the question, what is the purpose for a person going to an astrologer? On the one hand, self-knowledge is the main reason why we go to an astrologer, and the client who is searching for self-knowledge is the best client to go to an astrologer. But also, because astrology is rooted on this predictive notion of destiny and being able to predict the future of a person, astrology also is a wonderful tool for giving someone a sense of direction within this lifetime. So people who are looking for self-knowledge, as well as people who are looking for a direction in life in general, are the people who benefit the most from receiving an astrological reading.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Next question, Ryan Merrill.
All right. So when you're
I'm sorry if any of you are lightning pack generators and the human design situation. I'm very sorry. I don't know anything about it. I don't really have an opinion about it. All I hear is people walking around saying they're gonna burn their orange candle because they're a generator, supersonic califrage, and all of the things. And I just turned my head the next week. Merriman, what's your human design model thing?
Manifesting generator.
Exactly. I'd expect no less. Do you know that you can now get daily astrological updates by following us on TikTok and Instagram? Follow us at Oraculos Astrology on both TikTok and Instagram to keep your finger on the pulse of the astrology of the day every day.